Hey guys, Eastwood Journey to Programming here. I'm actually jumping on here pretty late at night, getting a little workout in. I'm all sweaty, look pretty questionable right now, but I still wanted to jump on and talk about our series about getting into industry and kind of give you guys a little talk about resumes and how to portray yourself in a good way so that you can attract recruiters to call you back and you can actually make it into interviews. So I want to start off with a little story. So for most of you guys, you're either coming in out of college, you're new to the industry, you've never really gotten programming experience per se, or you're changing careers altogether. And what's interesting about that is I actually have a friend of mine who, when I was pretty early on, I was maybe late high school, early college, I began working out of cafes. And for some of you that know, I've been programming for a decent amount of time now. So I had begun doing this stuff and I met this guy. He was a web developer. He owned his own little firm. So he was basically a freelancer, contractor, had a couple of guys that worked with him, and he used to work out of coffee shops. And I used to look up to him. His name is actually Tom. So if you're ever in San Diego and you run into a Tom at a cafe in East County, you may run into this guy. But he came from a different career path. He was actually in the law and legal industry before, but then he decided to kind of jump out of it cold turkey and get into programming. He didn't enjoy or feel fully into law anymore in the legal industry. So he was just a go-getter, taught himself how to program, started getting some clients locally, and began picking up work. And when I met him, he already had a firm running. So it was kind of interesting. As a college student, I was kind of I was in my computer science program and learning and getting my freelance jobs on the side too. So I looked to him for advice, but then one day he broke the news to me that he didn't want to run his company anymore. And he was beginning to apply for jobs full time. And, you know, it took a year for him to land an actual full-time role as a software developer. And it was really interesting because I would have thought this guy would have landed something so quickly, but it just wasn't the case. He had so much experience running a software development company, being a software developer that's self-taught and successful. You would have thought he would have instantly been picked up, but that wasn't the case. And, you know, after that year, he eventually got hired, and I caught up with him. And, he told me what the issue was. So a big problem that he faced was he didn't frame his resume well enough, for one. Two, he didn't push out enough applications from his standpoint. And three, he didn't know what to expect from the programming interviews at the time. And, the resolution or remedy he had for most of it, and his opinion now is he regrets not pushing out resumes more, sending out to more companies than he really wanted to aim for in the beginning, because what ended up happening is the first few months he sent out applications, tailored them really, really tightly for the specific companies he was applying for in San Diego, but he never heard back, and he kind of just played the waiting game. So he didn't really get out there like he normally does with getting clients. He wasn't out trying to apply for every company and trying to really hustle, I guess is the word you'd say. Instead, he played the waiting game. He pushed out some tailored resumes and just waited for them to call him back, and they didn't. They, most of the time, didn't call him back, and the ones that didn't even give him an interview past the recruiter call. So 6 months later, basically, he was telling me that he decided to send out applications to everybody. Any company that was hiring a software developer, a web developer specifically, because that was a specialty, he just pumped out a resume. Even if they were using a tech stack he was not necessarily a professional with, or let me rephrase, he was a professional with it, but he wasn't as well acquainted with it. He still sent them a resume, and he basically rewrote his resume to portray his skills a little bit better. Instead of just specifying the skills that he knew and had been working with, he wrote it as though he was telling a story, how he worked into developing his skills, how he thinks, and the work that he's done in the past. He really framed around the trials and tribulations it took to get those client projects fully complete successfully. So he made a few great changes there. The last thing that really made the difference was when he began landing interviews, he still wasn't getting offers. And the big problem with that was he just wasn't ready for the interviews, he said. Being from the legal industry and changing industries, he didn't really know what to expect. And in these days, you didn't have great books like Cracking the Coding Interview, and you didn't have Glassdoor, which gives you a whole bunch of information about what companies do and how they interview. But nonetheless, you still need to know the same type of information. And he learned really quickly that when he started doing his interviews, they wanted to know his technical skills. And he wasn't prepared to write code on the whiteboards and to write code in a text editor and just write stuff on the spot. He knew how to code. He was a great developer. He still is. He does really well for himself now. But the problem was he wasn't ready for that. So he went into interviews unprepared to have to solve problems on paper and on the board. So he didn't get offers. He began practicing and practicing, and he basically studied what we do in our computer science programs, data structures and algorithms, software architecture, so how to design basically the back ends for website applications. And he began studying how to explain them simply. Of course, he knew how to set these things up for websites and applications he had already made, but he had never had to briefly explain it to somebody in a one-on-one interview setting. So, moral of the story, after he prepared, after he really got all of this stuff down, which took him a full year to finally get to this point, he actually got a job with no problem. And that was probably 2011, 2012 now. So we're in 2018. He's been working full-time since that time, and his salary's only been increasing. His skills have been increasing. And I'm pretty sure he's a director or a VP now of the company he's at. So anyways, the moral of the story is, like Tom, you guys really need to think about how you portray yourselves in your resume. You can't go cookie cutter. You can't go to your friends and family who are not from our industry and expect their tips on how to set up a resume to work for our industry. And you really have to think about it, and you have to change. You have to be dynamic. So you need to put out a resume and test it. Send it out there. Make it really good. Tailor it to the companies you send it out to. But set up a story. Tell people what you really did. If you don't have a lot of experience, tell them the projects you did in school. Try to really attract them to your potential. And then once you get in, you really need to be prepared. So I think in the next video, what I'll do is I'll tell you guys exactly what you guys should be checking out online, all right? So again, this is Isa with Journey to Programming. Have a good one.